My daughter didn't invite me to her wedding, but she sent me a $70,000 invoice to pay for her dream party and the honeymoon. She even had the nerve to write, "You should feel lucky I'm letting you contribute at all." I just smiled and turned her dream into a nightmare. I'm Margaret Thompson, and for 58 years, I believed that love meant sacrifice, that being a good mother meant giving everything you had, then finding more to give. I spent 4 decades proving that theory, pouring my heart, my savings, and my entire existence into raising the daughter I thought would always be my greatest achievement. But sometimes, the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest. And sometimes, the quietest revenge is the most devastating of all. Let me take you back to where this story really begins. Not with a wedding invitation I never received, but with a little girl who used to call me her hero. Emily was 7 when her father died. Car accident on a rainy Tuesday morning, the kind of day that splits your life into before and after. One moment, I was a wife and mother living in our comfortable suburban home in Ohio. The next, I was a widow with a traumatized child and a mountain of medical bills from David's final weeks in the ICU. I was 33, working as a nurse at Cleveland General, making decent money but nothing extravagant. David had been the breadwinner. He managed the regional office for an insurance company, brought home the bigger paycheck, handled our investments. When he died, I discovered we weren't nearly as financially secure as I'd believed. The medical bills alone consumed most of our savings. But I had Emily. Sweet, brilliant Emily with her father's dark hair and my stubborn chin. She was everything that mattered, the only reason I got out of bed for months after the funeral. So when she came to me that first Christmas after we lost David, tears streaming down her face because she couldn't afford piano lessons anymore, I knew what I had to do. I sold our 4-bedroom house in the nice neighborhood and moved us into a tiny 2-bedroom apartment across town. I picked up weekend shifts at the hospital, then started working at a medical clinic on my days off. 2 jobs, sometimes 3, when the temp agency called. Emily never knew about the nights I survived on coffee and crackers because I'd spent grocery money on her school supplies, or how I wore the same 3 scrubs for 2 years because every extra dollar went toward her future. When Emily was 14, she got pneumonia. Bad case. The kind that lands you in the hospital for a week. I took unpaid leave to stay with her, sleeping in that uncomfortable chair beside her bed, holding her hand through fever dreams and breathing treatments. The bills from that week could have bought a car, but Emily recovered completely. That's all that mattered. "Mom," she whispered one night as I adjusted her blankets, "I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'll never have to find out, sweetheart," I promised. "I'll always be here." High school brought new challenges. Emily was academically gifted but socially awkward, the kind of kid who excelled in advanced placement classes but struggled to make friends. She wanted to join the debate team, take AP courses, apply for summer programs at prestigious universities. Each opportunity came with fees, travel costs, expenses that stretched my budget to the breaking point. I took a 3rd job, cleaning offices at night after my hospital shifts. Emily never knew. As far as she was concerned, Mom just worked a lot but somehow always found a way to make things happen. Piano lessons continued. She got the laptop she needed for school. When her debate team qualified for nationals, I found the money for her trip to Washington, D.C. "I'm going to make you proud, Mom," she said the night before she left for nationals. "I'm going to be somebody important someday." "You already make me proud," I told her. "You don't have to be anybody but yourself." But Emily had bigger dreams. She'd fallen in love with the idea of attending Northwestern University, a prestigious school with a price tag that made my head spin. Tuition, room and board, fees. We were looking at over $200,000 for 4 years. On a nurse's salary, it was impossible. I made it possible anyway. The house had been paid off with David's life insurance money, the only financial decision I'd gotten right in those early years. I took out a home equity loan against the property, borrowing every dollar I could. When that wasn't enough, I cashed in my retirement account, paying enormous penalties for early withdrawal. I sold my car and bought a 15-year-old Honda Civic with 160,000 miles on it. Emily got into Northwestern with a partial academic scholarship. The day her acceptance letter arrived, she danced around our tiny apartment like she'd won the lottery. "Mom, can you believe it? Northwestern. I'm actually going to Northwestern." I smiled and hugged her, calculating in my head how I'd make the numbers work. The scholarship covered about 40% of her costs. The rest would come from my savings, my retirement fund, and a pile of student loans I'd have to co-sign. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. You deserve this." College years were the hardest financially, but the most rewarding emotionally. Emily called home constantly those first 2 years, sharing every detail of her classes, her dorm life, her discoveries about herself and the world. She was thriving in ways I'd never imagined possible, making friends, joining organizations, finding her confidence. "Mom, I can't believe you made all this possible," she said during one of our weekly phone calls. "I know you sacrificed everything for me." "It wasn't a sacrifice," I lied smoothly. "It was an investment in your future. You're going to do amazing things." By her junior year, the phone calls became less frequent. Emily was busier, more involved in her studies and social life. When she did call, she talked mostly about her internships, her plans for graduate school, her new friends from families with money I couldn't imagine. That's when she first mentioned David Chen. "Mom, I met someone," she said during one of our increasingly rare conversations. "His name is David. Isn't that funny? Like Dad. He's pre-med, and his family has this incredible house in Lake Forest. His mother is on the board of like 6 different charities." I was happy for her. Emily had always been shy around boys, more interested in books than dating. If she'd found someone who made her smile, that was wonderful news. "He sounds nice, sweetheart. I'd love to meet him sometime." "Oh, well, we're still pretty new, but maybe during Christmas break." Christmas break came and went. Emily spent it with David's family in Lake Forest instead of coming home to our apartment in Cleveland. She called on Christmas morning, bright and cheerful, telling me about their Christmas Eve party, their elaborate dinner, their tradition of opening gifts while classical music played in the background. "It sounds lovely," I said, trying to keep the loneliness out of my voice. "I'm glad you're having such a nice time." "Thanks, Mom." "Oh, and David's mother said the sweetest thing. She said I fit right in with their family. Can you believe that?" I could believe it. Emily was smart, beautiful, well-educated, and charming when she felt comfortable. Of course she fit in with David's family. I'd spent 25 years making sure she'd be equipped to fit in anywhere. After graduation, Emily moved to Chicago to be closer to David, who was starting medical school at the University of Chicago. She got a job at a marketing firm, found an apartment in a trendy neighborhood, began building the life I'd always dreamed she'd have. Our relationship shifted during this time, becoming more distant but still warm. Emily was busy establishing her career, her relationship, her adult identity. I understood. I'd raised her to be independent, to chase her dreams without looking back. The fact that she was succeeding meant I'd done my job well. When David proposed 2 years later, Emily called me immediately, practically screaming with excitement. Mom, he proposed. David proposed. We're getting married." "Oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful news. Tell me everything." She described the proposal in detail. Dinner at a 5-star restaurant, the ring hidden in her dessert, David getting down on one knee right there in front of everyone. It sounded perfect. Romantic, exactly the kind of proposal Emily had dreamed about since she was a little girl. "When are you thinking for the wedding?" I asked. "We're not sure yet. Probably next fall. David's parents want to throw us an engagement party first, and then we need to find the perfect venue. His mother has some ideas about places that would work well for their guest list." Their guest list. Not our guest list, but their guest list. "Well, I can't wait to help plan everything. This is going to be so much fun." There was a tiny pause on Emily's end. "Oh, Mom, that's so sweet. But David's mother is actually really good at party planning. She's already talking to some event coordinators she knows. I think we'll probably just let her handle most of the details. I swallowed my disappointment. This was Emily's wedding, Emily's choice. If she wanted David's mother to plan it, that was perfectly fine. I'd had my turn to be the important mother in Emily's life. Now it was David's mother's turn. Of course, sweetheart. Whatever makes you happy. The engagement party happened 3 months later in Lake Forest. I bought a new dress, drove to Chicago, and spent an awkward evening surrounded by David's family and friends. Emily introduced me to people as my mother from Cleveland, a phrase that somehow made me sound quaint and provincial. I smiled, made polite conversation, and tried not to notice how naturally Emily fit into David's world. "Your daughter is lovely," David's mother, Patricia, said to me at one point. "She's adapted so well to our family's expectations." Adapted? Like Emily had been something that needed fixing, adjusting, improving. "Emily's always been special," I replied carefully. "Oh, absolutely. David adores her. We all do. She's exactly the kind of girl we always hoped he'd find." The kind of girl. Not Emily specifically, but the type, the mold. I realized in that moment that, to Patricia Chen, Emily wasn't a person with her own unique history and character. She was a successful acquisition, the right kind of daughter-in-law to complement their family brand. After the engagement party, Emily's calls became even less frequent. When we did talk, she seemed different, more polished, more careful with her words. She talked about wedding planning in vague terms, mentioning venues I'd never heard of, discussing invitation designs and menu selections without asking my opinion. "How many people are you thinking of inviting?" I asked during one conversation. "Well, David's family has a pretty extensive list. His father's business contacts, his mother's charity friends, family friends they've known for years. We're looking at maybe 300 people. 300 people. I tried to imagine it. A wedding reception with 300 guests, more people than I'd met in my entire life. That sounds like quite a celebration. It will be. David's mother, knows all the best vendors in Chicago. She's helping us put together something really special. Patricia. Not Mrs. Chen anymore, but Patricia. They were becoming close, Emily and her future mother-in-law. I was happy for Emily. Truly I was. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being gently pushed to the sidelines of my daughter's life. The feeling became certainty 6 months before the wedding, when Emily called with news that hit me like a physical blow. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something," she said, her voice careful and distant. "About the wedding." "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" "Well, David and I have been talking, and we've decided we want to keep the ceremony really small, intimate. Just immediate family. Immediate family." The words should have included me, but somehow I knew they didn't. "That sounds nice," I said slowly. "How small are we talking?" "Just parents and siblings. David has his parents and his sister. So it'll be David's parents, his sister, and her husband, and—" She trailed off. "And?" I prompted. "And that's it, really. We want it to be really personal, really meaningful. You understand, right, Mom?" I didn't understand. I couldn't understand. Emily was my only child, my entire world, the person I'd sacrificed everything for. How could her wedding not include me? "Emily," I said carefully, "I'm your mother. How am I not immediate family?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Mom, it's complicated. David's family has certain expectations, traditions, and with everything they're contributing to the wedding, we want to respect their wishes. Everything they're contributing, as if I hadn't contributed anything, as if 25 years of sacrifice, love, and devotion counted for nothing because I couldn't write a check with enough zeros." "I see," I said, though I didn't see it all. "It's not that we don't want you there, Mom. It's just, this is what works best for everyone. Everyone except me." "I understand," I lied. "Oh, good. I was worried you'd be upset, but I knew you'd understand. You always understand." I always understood, because I always accepted whatever Emily needed from me. I'd spent her entire life teaching her that my love was unconditional, that I'd support her no matter what. Now she was using that unconditional love as permission to exclude me from the most important day of her life. After I hung up the phone, I sat in my small apartment and stared at the wall where Emily's college graduation photo hung. In the picture, she was radiant in her cap and gown, her arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming with pride and joy. Under the photo was a card she'd given me that day. "Mom, I couldn't have done this without you. Thank you for believing in me always." That was 3 years ago. The girl in that photo felt like a stranger now. 2 weeks later, the email arrived. The subject line was innocuous enough: wedding contribution request. I opened it expecting maybe a link to a registry or information about where to send a gift. Instead, I found an itemized invoice. Thompson Chen Wedding Expenses Venue Rental, Oak Brook Hills Resort, $35,000 catering and bar service, 300 guests, $20,000 honeymoon package, 4 seasons Maui, $15,000 total amount, due, $70,000 payment due, date, 30 days from receipt. At the bottom, in Emily's careful handwriting, was a note that made my blood run cold. "Mom, David's parents are covering their portion of the wedding costs, and we thought it would be fair for you to contribute equally to make this day special. This represents your share of the major expenses. We know it's a lot, but you should feel lucky I'm letting you contribute at all. Please remit payment by the due date so we can finalize all arrangements. Thanks. Emily." I read it 3 times before the words fully sank in. $70,000, more money than I made in an entire year as a nurse, more than I had in my savings account, more than I'd spent on Emily's entire college education, and I should feel lucky to pay it. Lucky to fund a wedding I wasn't invited to attend. Lucky to finance a honeymoon for a daughter who had written me out of her life. Lucky to contribute to a celebration of a love that apparently had no room for the woman who had made it all possible. I set the invoice down on my kitchen table and stared at it until the numbers blurred together. Then, for the first time since David's funeral 25 years earlier, I put my head in my hands and cried. But as I sat there in my empty apartment, surrounded by the remnants of a life spent in service to someone who saw me as nothing more than a checkbook, something shifted inside me. The tears stopped. The grief hardened into something else. Emily wanted me to feel lucky to contribute. Fine. I'd contribute exactly what she'd asked for. But luck, I was beginning to realize, was a funny thing. Sometimes the luckiest thing that could happen to a person was learning exactly where they stood in the world. And sometimes the unluckiest thing was getting exactly what you thought you wanted. I picked up the invoice, folded it carefully, and smiled for the first time in weeks. Emily was about to learn that lesson the hard way. I sat with that invoice for 3 days, reading it over and over until I had memorized every line item, every number, every carefully calculated insult embedded in those itemized demands. $70,000. The amount wasn't just shocking, it was surgically precise in its cruelty. Emily knew exactly what I made as a nurse. She knew I'd already emptied my retirement account for her college education. She knew I drove a 15-year-old Honda and lived in a cramped apartment because I'd given her everything I had. She knew, and she asked anyway. But something Emily didn't know was that her father had been more financially savvy than either of us realized. David had taken out a substantial life insurance policy early in our marriage, one he'd never mentioned. After his death, after the medical bills and funeral expenses, there had been money left over. Good money. I'd invested it carefully over the years, watching it grow while I lived modestly on my nursing salary. Emily also didn't know about the inheritance from my parents, who had died within 6 months of each other during Emily's sophomore year of college. They'd been frugal people, Depression-era survivors who saved every penny. Their small house and modest investments had left me with another chunk of money I'd never touched, never mentioned, never counted on for anything except true emergencies. In total, I had just over $300,000 that Emily knew nothing about. Money that was supposed to be her inheritance someday. Money that represented a lifetime of careful planning and sacrifice by 3 generations of our family. Money that could easily cover her $70,000 invoice. I could pay it. The question was whether I should. On the 4th day after receiving the invoice, I drove to my bank and made an appointment with my financial advisor, a kind man named Robert, who had helped me navigate investments since David's death. "Margaret," he said, settling into his chair across from his desk, "what can I do for you today?" I slid the invoice across his desk. "I need to understand my options." Robert read the document carefully, his expression growing more concerned with each line. When he finished, he looked up at me with something that might have been pity. "This is from your daughter?" "Yes." "For a wedding you're not invited to attend?" "Correct." He set the paper down gently. "Margaret, you know I'm not supposed to give personal advice, but as someone who's known you for 15 years, this seems unreasonable." "Unreasonable," I repeated. "That's one word for it. You have the funds to cover this, of course, but paying it would significantly impact your retirement security. And frankly, the tone of this request," he gestured at the invoice, "it seems less like a daughter asking for help and more like someone making demands. What would you do, Robert, if this were your daughter?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I'd want to understand what happened to the relationship first. This level of entitlement doesn't develop overnight." He was right. I'd spent the last 3 days thinking Emily had suddenly become a different person, but the truth was harder to accept. Emily hadn't changed. I'd just finally seen who she really was. Or maybe, more accurately, I'd finally seen who I'd allowed her to become. "Let's say I pay this," I said. "What legal protections do I have?" "What kind of protections are you thinking about?" "If I'm going to contribute $70,000 to my daughter's wedding, I want it documented. I want a contract that specifies exactly what this payment covers and what it doesn't cover." Robert nodded slowly. "That's actually very wise. We could draft something that treats this as a gift with specific terms. No future financial obligations, clear boundaries about what this payment represents." "Can you recommend a lawyer?" "I can." "Margaret, are you sure about this?" I thought about Emily as a 7-year-old, sobbing because she couldn't take piano lessons anymore. I thought about her at 14 holding my hand through pneumonia. I thought about her graduation day, telling me she couldn't have done it without me. Then I thought about her voice on the phone, casual and dismissive. David's family has certain expectations. "I'm sure," I said. The lawyer Robert recommended was a sharp woman named Linda Morrison, who specialized in family financial matters. When I explained the situation, she didn't even try to hide her shock. "Your daughter sent you a bill for her wedding?" "An itemized invoice," I corrected. "And you're not invited to this wedding?" "Apparently not." Linda shook her head. "In 30 years of family law, I've seen some incredible things, but this might take the cake." "I want to pay it," I said, "but I want protection." "What kind of protection?" "I want a contract that makes it clear this payment settles all parental financial obligations, forever. I want Emily to understand that if she accepts this money, she's accepting that our financial relationship is over." Linda leaned back in her chair. "That's actually brilliant. You're treating her like what she's treating you like, a business transaction." "Exactly." "I can draft something, but Margaret, once you do this, there's no going back. This kind of contract, it's essentially cutting her off financially while giving her exactly what she asked for." "I understand." "Do you? Because what you're proposing is a very sophisticated form of calling her bluff. If Emily is expecting to continue receiving money from you in the future, for a house down payment, for her children's education, for emergencies, this contract would prevent that." "Good." Linda smiled for the first time since I'd walked into her office. "You know what? I think I like you, Margaret Thompson. The contract took a week to draft. It was elegantly simple. In exchange for the $70,000 payment, Emily would acknowledge that this constituted a final settlement of all parental financial obligations. Any future contact between us would need to be initiated by Emily, and any future financial requests would be null and void under the terms of this agreement. Linda had included a clause that particularly pleased me. The recipient acknowledges that this payment is made in lieu of any inheritance expectations and represents the donor's full and final contribution to the recipient's financial well-being. She'll have to sign it to get the money, Linda explained, and once she signs it, she can never ask you for another dollar. What if she doesn't sign it? Then she doesn't get the money. And if she does sign it, then she gets exactly what she asked for, $70,000 and complete financial independence from her mother. I wrote the check that afternoon, attached it to the contract, and mailed it to Emily's apartment in Chicago. Then I went home and did something I hadn't done in 25 years. I started making plans that had nothing to do with my daughter. Emily called 2 days later. "Mom, I got your payment, but there's some kind of contract with it?" "Yes, there is." "I don't understand. Why do I need to sign a contract to accept a gift?" A gift. As if the $70,000 was something I'd spontaneously decided to give her, rather than an invoice she'd sent me. "Because, Emily, if I'm going to pay for your wedding, I want our financial arrangement to be clear." "Our financial arrangement? This is the last money you'll ever receive from me. The contract makes that official." Silence on the other end of the line. "Mom, you're being ridiculous. It's just a contract. You know I'll always need you." Need me, not love me, want me, miss me, need me. As in, need my money. Then you shouldn't have any problem signing it. But what if David and I need help with a house someday? Or if we have kids and need help with childcare costs? Then you'll figure it out the same way everyone else does. Everyone else doesn't have a mother who can afford to help. There it was, the truth, finally spoken out loud. Emily didn't see me as a person who had worked and sacrificed and saved. She saw me as a resource she was entitled to access whenever convenient. "Emily," I said calmly, "you have a choice. You can sign the contract and get your $70,000, or you can send the money back and we can continue our relationship as it was. But we need the money for the wedding. Then sign the contract." "This is crazy. You're being crazy." "Am I? You sent me a bill for a wedding I'm not invited to attend. You told me I should feel lucky to pay for your honeymoon. And now you're angry that I want our financial arrangement documented?" Another long silence. "I need to think about this," Emily finally said. "Take all the time you need, but understand that if you cash that check, you're agreeing to the terms." She hung up without saying goodbye. 3 weeks passed. I heard nothing from Emily, which wasn't entirely unusual, but felt different now. I knew she was struggling with a decision she'd never expected to face. Take the money and lose access to future funding, or give up the elaborate wedding she'd planned. During those 3 weeks, I did something I should have done years earlier. I started living for myself. I'd been working at Cleveland General for 28 years, mostly out of necessity, but partly out of habit. I'd never taken vacation time, never traveled, never pursued hobbies or interests outside of work and Emily. Now, for the first time since David's death, I had the luxury of choice. I gave my supervisor notice that I'd be retiring at the end of the year. The decision surprised everyone, including me. I was only 58, young for retirement, but I had enough saved to make it work, especially if I wasn't funding Emily's lifestyle anymore. "You sure about this, Margaret?" asked Carol, my closest friend at the hospital. "What are you going to do with yourself?" "I have no idea," I said. "Isn't that wonderful?" I started small. I signed up for a watercolor painting class at the community center, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. The first class was awkward. I was surrounded by retirees who'd clearly been painting together for years, but the instructor, a gentle woman named Susan, made me feel welcome. Have you ever painted before? She asked. No, I've been busy. Well, you're not busy now. That's all that matters. I wasn't busy now. For the first time in decades, my time was my own. I also started looking at real estate listings, not because I needed to move, but because I wanted to. My apartment had served its purpose. It was cheap, functional, close to the hospital, but it had never felt like home. It had felt like a temporary stopping point that had somehow lasted 25 years. I found a small condo in a nice complex about 15 minutes from downtown Cleveland. It had a balcony overlooking a courtyard, updated appliances, and best of all, no memories of Emily's childhood. No ghosts of bedtime stories and homework help and late-night conversations about her dreams for the future. The realtor, an energetic woman named Beth, was puzzled by my requirements. So you want to downsize? She asked. I want a right size, I corrected. I want a place that fits my actual life, not the life I thought I was supposed to have. What's the difference? My actual life is quiet, simple, and peaceful. The life I thought I was supposed to have involved having my daughter and her family over for holidays, babysitting grandchildren, being needed. And now I'm learning the difference between being needed and being wanted. 4 weeks after I'd sent the contract to Emily, she called again. Mom, I signed the papers and deposited the check. Good. The wedding is in 6 weeks. I hope you have a lovely day. David's parents are throwing us a rehearsal dinner the night before. It's going to be really elegant. I waited to see if she'd invite me to the rehearsal dinner, this event that wouldn't have the same immediate family-only restrictions as the wedding. She didn't. That sounds nice, I said. And then we're leaving for Maui the next day. 4 Seasons Resort, Ocean View Suite. It's going to be incredible. I'm sure it will be. Mom, are you mad at me? The question caught me off guard. Mad? No, I wasn't mad. Mad was too small a word for what I felt. Mad was temporary, emotional, something that could be fixed with an apology or explanation. What I felt was bigger than mad. What I felt was free. No, Emily, I'm not mad. Good, because I know the contract thing was weird, but David's family has all these lawyers, and they said it was probably smart to have everything documented anyway. David's family had lawyers who'd looked at the contract. They'd probably advised Emily to sign it, not understanding what she was giving up because they couldn't imagine parents actually cutting off their children financially. In their world, family money flowed freely in all directions. They had no frame of reference for understanding what Emily had just sacrificed. I'm sure they gave you good advice, I said. So we're okay? Everything's normal? Normal. Such an interesting choice of words. Everything's exactly as it should be, I said. Emily seemed satisfied with that answer. We talked for a few more minutes about inconsequential things. Her job, the weather, nothing important. When we hung up, I realized it was the most superficial conversation we'd had in years, and somehow the most honest. Emily had what she wanted, $70,000 and complete independence from her mother's expectations or judgment. I had what I needed, clarity about where I stood in her life, and legal protection from future financial demands. We both got exactly what we'd asked for. The wedding was on a Saturday in October. I spent the day painting in my art class, working on a landscape that was giving me trouble. The trees never looked quite right, too stiff and artificial, lacking the organic flow of real branches. You're thinking too much, Susan observed, watching me struggle with the same section for the 3rd time. Trees don't grow according to rules. They grow according to circumstances, wind, light, soil conditions. Stop trying to paint the perfect tree and start painting the tree that would actually grow in that spot. I set down my brush and looked at the painting with fresh eyes. She was right. I'd been trying to paint the tree I thought should be there, not the tree that actually made sense. Sometimes, I said, I think you're talking about more than painting. Susan smiled. The best art teachers usually are. That evening, I saw the wedding photos on Instagram. Emily had never blocked me from her social media accounts. Probably never occurred to her that I might not want to see her perfect new life documented in real time. The pictures were stunning. Emily looked radiant in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary, standing next to David in what was clearly an expensive tuxedo. The venue was gorgeous, all white flowers and elegant lighting, exactly the kind of sophisticated affair that David's family specialized in. In the background of several photos, I could see Patricia Chen, David's mother, beaming with pride and satisfaction. In one picture, Patricia had her arm around Emily during what appeared to be the mother-daughter dance, both of them laughing at something off camera. Emily had posted a caption under that particular photo, "Dancing with my wonderful mother-in-law. So grateful to be part of such an amazing family." My wonderful mother-in-law. Such an amazing family. I studied that photo for a long time, looking at Emily's face. She looked genuinely happy, genuinely content. This wasn't a performance or a consolation prize. Emily wasn't settling for Patricia because she couldn't have me. She was choosing Patricia because Patricia offered her something I never could. Entry into a world of money and status and social connections that I'd spent Emily's entire life trying to give her access to. I'd succeeded. I'd raised Emily to fit into David's family's world so perfectly that she no longer needed or wanted the world she'd come from. Looking at those photos, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Emily wasn't just rejecting me. She was rejecting the life I represented, the struggles, the sacrifices, the constant awareness that money was finite and had to be earned. She was choosing ease over authenticity, comfort over connection, and that choice told me everything I needed to know about who my daughter had become. I closed Instagram and opened my laptop. I had emails to write, to realtors about viewing the condo again, to travel agents about trips I'd always wanted to take, to volunteer coordinators at organizations that could use help from someone with medical experience. For the first time in 30 years, I was making plans that had nothing to do with what Emily needed, wanted, or expected from me. It felt like learning to breathe again.